crazy woman mistakes customer for worker and demands he load her purchases in her car. To hear more stories like this one, be sure to like this video, and subscribe to StoryBlend. To be the first to hear these stories, click the notification bell, and we'll let you know the moment we have a new story to tell. Parking lots have a high ratio of entitled people. People who are entitled tend to royally disturb the normal portion of the population. While their highbrow attitude can be ignored most of the time, there are a few occasions where you must interact with these particularly insufferable individuals. One such occasion will be described here. While assisting an elderly couple outside of a local grocery store, a nurse in full gear, who had left their job only minutes before after working a long shift, was somehow mistaken for a grocery store employee by another customer. Though these sorts of misidentification are usually easily sorted out, this woman, a poster child for entitled people everywhere, thought she could force everyone around her to bend to her every whim. Well, that's not exactly what happened. After a long day at work, he just wanted to go home. Brad, a nurse, had just finished an extended 14-hour shift. It was supposed to be shorter, but he was needed for a rapid response unit in the local ACU. His next shift would be in 9 hours and he didn't have anything to eat between now and when he would have to be back for his next shift. This meant that he'd need to put something on in his slow cooker overnight while he slept so that he'd have something hot to eat the next day at work. Figuring a quick run to the nearest big box store would be the easiest response to his dilemma would actually be his first mistake. Brad had been in such a hurry leaving work that he still had his stethoscope still on from his previous shift. This, combined with the fact that he was still wearing royal blue scrubs, along with a large name tag with RN inscribed on it, should have meant that his occupation could be easily determined by a simple glance in his direction. Well, not everyone is bright enough to put 2 and 2 together, and that includes the villain of this story. Of course he'd help this cute, old couple. As Brad began walking towards the store, he noticed an elderly couple struggling to load a large box into their SUV. These two were very old. They had to be over 90 years old if they were a day. They reminded him of the elderly patients he would normally see with a medical history list 3 pages long. There was no way the elderly man's hips could take the weight of lifting that box without snapping. Brad figured he had worked enough tonight. He approached the couple and addressed the female half of the couple, kindly offering up his help. It was gladly accepted and he got their box, which turned out to be a TV, loaded with very little difficulty. It was more cumbersome than heavy for him, a healthy, fit young man. Brad then began chatting with the woman who was explaining that the TV was a gift for their son and her husband hadn't wanted to wait for help. Brad had internally wondered why an employee wasn't helping. The couple thanked Brad and were about to be on their way when they were all stopped by another customer, who Brad took one look at and knew was going to be a serious problem. She didn't ask for help, she demanded it. A middle-aged woman approached Brad and the elderly with what seemed like 2 massive boxes stacked in a cart as if a blind madman, with a poor sense of balance, had just thrown them there. Every small motion of the cart made it look like one of the boxes was about to fall right out. After staring expectantly at Brad for a short moment, she suddenly barked out, "Hey! Hey!" Startled, we stopped our conversation and looked over. It was a lady in her 50s, dressed in a cheap-looking beige pantsuit with a Get Your Manager hairstyle standing about 15 feet away with a hand on her overly broad hip. Brad wrote. "If you are about done," she spat out, "I need help over here." She gestured over at her cart, which, upon closer inspection, Brad realized were unassembled bookshelves. Brad had the sudden realization that the woman thought he worked for the store. Him, the guy in the scrubs and wearing a stethoscope, was a worker at this big box store. Hoping to clear up the confusion as quickly as possible, Brad began, "Oh. Sorry, I don't work. Lady, you are already making me late. Just get it done. And don't scratch my paint up." The elderly lady and Brad exchanged looks of disbelief, and Brad tried once again to explain. "I don't work," he was all he managed to get out before she interrupted him again. "Lady, just get it done." At this point, Brad was not interested in explaining himself any further. The lady pushed her cart in his direction, obviously in order to get him to begin loading her car. That would prove to be her big mistake. It wasn't his fault, but he still got blamed. After pushing the cart haphazardly towards Brad, the woman stepped away from the cart to grab her purse, grumbling about flipping idiots as she dug for her keys. All the while, the cart rolled further away and one wheel went off the curb. The uneven load, mixed with this unwanted little jolt, caused the cart to topple over. Brad instinctively jumped forward to try to prevent everything from falling, but it was too late. He was unsuccessful. The lady turned just in time to see her particle board bookshelves spill out on the cement. The corners of the boxes were totally crushed and one had torn open, with a few pieces and packaging now exposed. She completely lost her head once she saw it and instantly became a raging maniac. "Lady, what the EFF? You flipping moron. Pick them up. God. I'm going to have you fired. You owe me new bookshelves. And I'm late." "Late to what? We may never know." Furthermore, Brad had checked out at this point. "Brad, pick them up yourself. I don't work here." He then turned to go inside, and that's when he felt her grab onto his sleeve in an awkward attempt to try to yank him around. Turning the tables on her, he jerked backward only to surprise her with a fury of his own. He spun around and thrust his finger into her now violently red face. She opened her mouth to start screaming again, but he cut her off before she could even begin. "Brad, no. Don't touch me. Shut up. I do not work here, and even if I did, I'd quit before I helped you clean up your crap." She stood there, speechless, mouth opening and closing, sputtering in shock that I dared raise my voice at her, Brad wrote. The boxes still laid battered and broken on the ground, and both parties paused for a moment as if the battle had exhausted everyone to the point of speechlessness. This was the true battleground of modern-day, Middle America. As tensions began to erupt once more, the doors to the store opened wide as the manager and one employee finally came out to figure out just what was going on with this situation. Finally, help from the real staff. Noticing the manager and employee, the lady shook herself free from her speechlessness and then some. "Lady," shouting, "are you the manager? This man damaged my bookshelves and is refusing to pay for them." Brad just stared at her, in total shock. Seriously? Even after she came to accept the fact that Brad, who was dressed nothing like the staff, didn't work there, she still didn't have an apologetic bone in her body. As Brad opened his mouth to tell that lady what's what, someone else stepped in and did it for him. Before I could voice any denial, the elderly gentleman I'd helped earlier steps in and explained the situation to the manager. The lady was still voicing complaints, but the manager realized the real situation and apologized to me and the couple, Brad wrote. Brad, feeling curious about how the rest of this would play out and still kinda ticked about being falsely accused, stuck around to watch as the managers turned their attention to the woman. They inspected the bookshelves and declared them undamaged, though they did offer to replace them free of charge. But the lady was now done with the whole situation. She said no, she's already too late because of me, then glared over at me before turning back to the manager. Brad went on to explain. "Lady, just load them. I'm already late enough because of this." The manager and employee then lifted the boxes up and got them wedged into the lady's car. Brad and the elderly couple were still left with the horribly sour taste of being yelled at by this woman. Also, the loading of the boxes was about as awkward as you would imagine. The lady was now fiercely standing over her possessions as if she was a starved lioness mother defending her cubs. She was micromanaging the two gents and barking orders at them left and right. They ended up having to rearrange the boxes several times in order to placate her. She definitely wasn't going to be happy when she got home, however, thanks to the actions of one surprise hero. A parting gift from the kindly couple. As Brad made his way to the store, still a little heated from that disaster of a woman, the elderly woman he had helped approached him. "Elderly lady, sir. Thank you so much for helping us with the TV. I'm so sorry some people are so rude." Then she reached out to shake his hand, and when he grasped hers, he felt her press something into his palm. Elderly lady, whispering, "Don't look yet. Wait till she leaves." Brad slid whatever it was into his pocket and the elderly lady walked away. The crazy lady then got into her car and, without apologizing or thanking anyone for their help, peeled out. Brad couldn't help but hope that she'd drive fast enough to damage those boxes perfectly placed in her car. Now that she was finally gone, it was time to turn his attention to something that really mattered, his grocery shopping. I finally entered the store to grab my food items, and when I reached into my pocket, I pulled out a plastic bag with a bunch of hardware. I realized immediately that the sweet little old lady took advantage of the commotion to steal the hardware out of the crazy lady's ripped box, Brad recounted. The biggest grin filled his face as he continued shopping. He could only imagine the crapstorm that would be that lady's life when she found out that the box she had so desperately guarded was missing the most important pieces. It was Brad's secret hope that the lady would realize her massive mistake and maybe even learn something, but he had been a nurse long enough to know the truth. At least he got a new petty revenge hero to idolize. That old woman was a savage. Thank you for listening. Let us know what you thought of this story in the comments below, and if you want to hear more stories like this one, like this video and subscribe to Story Blend.